to share with us a couple of examples, in addition to this conference, of work that has been done, that I have been involved with in Algeria towards establishing this infrastructure for the field, right? And when I talk about infrastructure, I mean things like this conference, right? Is a key component of the infrastructure of the field of writing studies in Algeria that we're having today, right? And conducting studies about teaching writing or about theories of writing that are prominent in writing studies, right? Or developing curricula, designing courses, right? Managing programs, writing programs, right? And collaborations, right? To produce research as well, right? And so these sorts of things. So I want to begin with a study that I have, like the first example I want to begin with is a study that I have conducted with Wafa, who is one of the co-organizers of the conference, and that came out as a book chapter in 2024, called Challenges and Opportunities of Developing an EFL Writing Course in Algeria. So I want to use this as an example of a study that has been done on writing in Algeria, and kind of use it as an example for others to do kind of work like this, right? To collaborate, and as part of that collaboration, also highlight examples of course design and working together to enhance student learning, and introduce progressive change towards enhancing pedagogical practices in terms of teaching writing in the country, and so the study, kind of the main kind of exigence or the main motivation for the study, right, was that when Wafa and I were discussing writing in Algeria, it came up that Wafa noticed kind of challenges with providing English writing instruction for her students, which has been identified as a widespread issue in the MENA region by Arnold et al. In 2017. And so we thought, okay, we want to work on this. We want to try and make sure that teaching writing isn't something that is hard to provide. I mean, of course, it takes time and effort, but that it can be done. And in addition, there has been kind of a need identified to build what's called a writing culture. Not that there isn't a writing culture at all, right? Because we have other languages, and writing has always been an important part in the region, but we want to do more of this kind of building out of this infrastructure, right? Of having regular conferences, of having regular publications. Because historically in applied linguistics, in language studies, kind of in Algeria, there has been a lot of focus on ESP, on EMI, right? But actually one of the most important ways to act on these is teaching writing, right? Writing is a huge part of teaching language, right? And we can work more on doing that and enhancing the role of that in our education system. And so that's kind of what's meant by writing culture, is to think about how can we introduce writing into programs and students who may not be just English majors or language majors, for example. And how can we use it to develop students' ESP skills, right? And students learning in other fields like engineering, biology, etc. And Also, there has been a need identified in the MENA region for research on L2 writing teachers and teacher educators. And this study with WEFA has been kind of a study of professional development, as WEFA has worked towards enhancing her expertise in L2 writing and familiarizing herself with key texts and key theories, and thinking about applying those in her context. And so that's what we have done in this study. We have looked at kind of how WEFA's expertise has been enhanced over the course of the research study. And by looking at, specifically reflections and experiences, teaching experiences, and reflections on applying theories from the field into the classroom and course design process. And so we aimed to explore the impact of adaptive expertise, which is a kind of a theoretical construct in teacher education, on WEFA, the course instructor's confidence, course design, and teaching quality and student learning experiences. We examined the affordances of something called collaborative autoethnography as a professional development approach for enhancing teaching, and investigated the role of collaborative autoethnography in assisting underrepresented scholars from the periphery in joining international scholarly conversations. And so the methodological framework we used is this thing called collaborative autoethnography, right? And so we kind of engaged in deep introspection, in deep thinking about what is WEFA doing, what are the challenges that she's running into when she designs a writing course, or when she redesigns her writing course and tries to improve it in light of the best practices and research findings on writing studies around the world. And so as WEFA revised her writing course to bring in, to make sure it is informed by research from, some of you talked about Kanagaraja and other important figures and texts in the field. We met bi-weekly on Zoom for a full academic year to discuss readings and how they apply to course design and lesson planning, and challenges students are experiencing and challenges that she's experiencing in applying those, in incorporating those ideas. We discussed research findings and analyzed various contextual constraints and identified solutions. We interviewed each other using semi-structured interviews. We discussed context-sensitive ways to design WEFA's writing course in light of administrative requirements, such as timed exams and such entrenched behaviorist exercises as thesis statement drills. We wrote reflective entries on course design and teaching experiences, and documented the reactions by administrators, faculty, and colleagues, and designed a WordPress course website, including developing pedagogical materials, which we're happy to share, and we encourage others to kind of use WordPress as a free platform to build a website for your courses, as WEFA did. And it can be a nice way to make things accessible to students, and to facilitate collaboration between colleagues and sharing of pedagogical resources. And we also engaged in content analysis of the departmental pedagogical manual. And so the theoretical framework we used for the study was called adaptive expertise, which refers to the continuous process of enhancing instructional practices. And so we kind of analyzed to what extent has Wafa adapted her expertise throughout this process of creating, of revising and teaching her course. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to try and kind of summarize the findings in as little space as possible. So kind of one of the, this is a quote from the chapter that kind of highlights some of our findings from this study. We found that Wafa enhanced her expertise by sensitively and effectively introducing a process writing approach to her class, creatively incorporating written and oral feedback for students under challenging circumstances, and embracing such course management practices as providing a course calendar, detailed assignment sheets, and daily lessons for her students. Our study contributed to the notion of adaptive expertise through Wafa's learning by developing new knowledge, skills, and beliefs in teaching foreign language writing courses. Wafa learned to enhance her teaching despite contextual constraints, designing a user-friendly open access course site with strong content. We developed students' awareness and use of the process approach into their writing and research practices, embracing peer and instructor feedback, revision, and rhetorical awareness. I can't tell you how many challenges Wafa has run into as she worked towards revising her course and incorporating some of these approaches, like the process approach, and providing feedback and things like that. How can you provide feedback when you have a massive amount of students, for example? And so we discussed strategies for ensuring that's done in a kind of an appropriate way that is not too burdensome on the instructor. And so in terms of the implications of collaborative autoethnography for professional development, we believe that it can serve as an excellent professional development tool. So we encourage faculty to collaborate. And as you could see that this research study, it was a research study, but not just a research study, right? It was also an opportunity for professional development that is sustained and that resulted in significant results. We found that this model of professional development seems to be better to kind of the kinds of workshops that we might see, which can be useful, but not necessarily for significant sustained change in teaching practices and course design practices. Because we have found that Wafa was able to change a massive amount of things over the course of the year, thanks to our close working relationship. That wouldn't have been possible to change just by giving workshops on lesson planning, workshop on course design, workshop on feedback, a workshop on the process approach. It would have been countless workshops, and even then it would be hard to follow up and follow through and make those changes. But working closely and thinking about what we're doing and reflecting and documenting what we're doing really helped create results in terms of professional development and student learning outcomes. Kind of our takeaway from using this collaborative autoethnography as a professional development tool and also as a research tool. And so we hope that we see more of this in the field. We see more collaborative autoethnography used as a professional development model, as a one-on-one professional development model or a small group professional development model in Algeria and beyond. Now, the second example I want to share with you is the writing center work, and I remember giving a presentation, I believe in 2021 or so, or 2020 maybe, about the importance of establishing writing centers in Algeria. And this is another excellent example of the infrastructure build out that we're talking about. Writing center, establishing writing centers in Algerian universities is a significant part of this infrastructure. And shortly after that, I have had the privilege of working with Dr. Fatima Belkhair as well, who went on to start what I believe is the first writing center in Algeria, in terms of a physical writing center. Fatima and I had worked together on a virtual writing center that was supported by an organization called the International Network of Algerian Scientists. And we supported Algerian scholars who were working to publish their papers and worked on their manuscripts. And Fatima did an excellent job working with those scholars, and we worked together to learn as much as possible about writing center culture and work. And she was able to take that and build the first writing center in Tlemcen University. And here too, we ran into a lot of challenges. If we gave up after the first, challenge, none of this would have been possible, both with Wafa and Fatima. And so, in terms of where to do it and who sponsors it and who runs it and stuff like that, right? And so I remember one of the things we talked about is something we learned from an article about a writing center experience in Poland that Reichelt wrote about, which is that all you need to start a writing center is a table and 2 chairs, right? And so I remember Fatima and I were talking about how, okay, all we need is a table and 2 chairs. And Fatima had access to that through the intensive language center. And so that's where she started it. And it didn't require any kind of massive decision or funding from the leadership or anything like that. And so the situation has evolved since. Fatima has achieved some great results, and she got an increasing amount of support for it. But the humble beginnings are important. And then once you have some data to share, then you get more interest from people to support the work. So writing centers can address a great deal of challenges. They are a great alternative to exams, help students learn to be academically honest, avoid plagiarism, helps scientists publish their manuscript. It's not just for students. Helps students apply for jobs and write business reports, foster research, reading and critical thinking skills, develop revision strategies to train independent writers, offer pedagogical workshops for professors on how to design strong assignments, and tackle linguistic insecurity and instill a translingual approach that values students' multilingual repertoires and writing in different languages to achieve one's learning goals in any field. And so writing centers can really help establish a culture of writing to learn, right, for anyone across the university, not just for English majors or language majors. And so typically writing centers are administered by people who specialize in English or language studies. It doesn't have to be English, as long as it's someone who is familiar with pedagogy, with how to teach, didactics, right? And so, usually involves, and many of you know this, all of this by now, but, it happens in the form usually of one-on-one consultations, but it could also include workshops, and usually involves a director